Welcome, guys, to another live episode of KC Chase to the Pennant. As you see in the thumbnail, we're going to talk about Bobby Witt Jr.'s massive extension that happened just a couple days ago. 11-year, $288.7 million guaranteed, up to 14 years, $377.7 million. And it's the first time that we've ever signed a guy like this to this kind of contract, and we just need to talk about it. With me today is, as always, is my co-host Kevin O'Brien. Kev, how you doing?
Doing well. I mean, just kind of in a surreal state after seeing that Bobby Witt extension. We've had a couple days to kind of really digest it and kind of looking forward. But it's a great day to be. Well, I guess every day is a great day to be a Royals fan, but today is a really great day to be a Royals fan. Just after that massive extension and being in the news.
Yeah, it's again crazy that the Royals, in a week where the Chiefs are in the Super Bowl, the Royals are the team in KC that is getting the most attention. Obviously, Chiefs are in the Super Bowl, but like seeing the Royals sign this kind of player to this kind of deal is wild, and I'm amazed that it's even like going on around the world of sports news. Speaking of sports, this is former sports anchor from In the Den with Jackson Ogden, my great friend, someone that I went to school with, and now works for Farm to Fountains as a writer. It's Jackson Ogden. Jackson, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. It is, like you said, a really good week to be a Kansas City sports fan. Obviously, the Chiefs in the Super Bowl for the fourth time in the last 5 years. Hopefully, they get that third ring. And then, obviously, the Royals ink up one of the best young stars in baseball, probably one of the top five guys in the American League at this point, at least going forward with Ohtani out of the league. Never really thought this day would happen. In the back of my mind, always kind of felt like he would end up being a Dodger or a Yankee or somewhere like that when his initial rookie contract ran up. So, man, I'm just thrilled. I'm on cloud nine right now about it, and I'm excited to talk about it.
Do you remember all those times that you've told me to temper my expectations about the Royals? I still remember last year. I was so excited because Bobby Witt emerges, and you're seeing guys like Melendez, and you're seeing younger guys like Garcia kind of start to come up to the majors, and you're like, let's slow down, give it a minute. But it just feels weird to be excited, more excited. I feel more excited about Royals baseball now than the Super Bowl to an extent.
Wow, that's a big statement right there.
Listen, okay, let's just get into it. In the history of sports here in Kansas City, I've felt like this. There's never been a better week. Never been a better week. Because we go from, Chiefs going to the Super Bowl, they beat the Ravens, they beat all the narratives, right? And you also get, I know it's not Kansas City related, but Taylor Swift winning that Grammy. She's doing her thing and everyone's supporting her. And then you get this extension that happens right out of the blue. You get the announcement that, Kansas City in general gets to host 4 World Cup matches. And then you have the Current coming up soon who are going to unveil their new stadium. And then Sporting is doing what Sporting always does. And it just feels weird. It feels crazy that for so many years, Kansas City has been through rough seasons with baseball, football, soccer, not having basketball, not having hockey. And now it's like we've peaked. We've peaked to an extent. But I hope, honestly, this is just a glimpse of what sports will be like in Kansas City for years to come.
Yeah, if you're a K-State fan, it was even a better week. If you're a KU fan, it kind of went back a little bit of a week. So,
Jacob,
or if you just don't like KU, it was a great week as well.
That too.
Mizzou's yet to win a SEC game this year, so I'm living through KU's misery because I have nothing to cheer for. So, I'll take it. Thank you, K-State, because my team couldn't do that in a million years.
I don't get how they won. I was watching that game, and I was like, how did UMKC could have beat KU? Like, you remember that game, Jackson, when we watched UMKC down?
Not to dive too much into college basketball, but KU is a very, very flawed product this year. And not that any college team isn't. They're a bunch of kids, but KU is a definitely a work in progress right now. They're not going to lose at Allen Fieldhouse, but you get them outside of there and they are dicey right now.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, let's hop off college basketball and let's talk about Bobby Witt. So again, 11-year, $288.7 million contract, guaranteed. Like, again, I think the contracts that we given to Alex Gordon, Hosmer, Salvi, I think those combined don't even match whatever we gave Bobby Witt. I want to hear your guys' initial thoughts when you heard that Bobby Witt was going to be extended for a very long time.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was just the timing of it. I was at work and then I followed Jeff Passan and I get the notifications. So when that notification came up, everything was just blowing up. We heard a lot of talk about the off season, like, hey, extending Witt was a priority for fans, for everybody. But we didn't think it was going to happen because, like, why would Witt sign? He's coming off one of his best years. The team just won only 56 games. It's like, is he really a believer in the Royals organization, especially after such a lousy year? But it sounds like the Royals made a lot of moves this offseason, and that had an impact on him. And it sounds like, Bobby Witt's like, hey, I want to stay here, but you guys got to do your part. And then the Royals, they get Seth Lugo, they get Michael Wacha, they get veterans like Hunter Renfroe and Adam Frazier. They improve the bullpen. And it seems like that was enough for Bobby to say, hey, yeah, like, you guys are serious, so I'm going to commit to you guys. It's really just it was shocking. I expected it to maybe happen closer to spring training if it was going to happen, like probably even during spring training. So the fact that it happened like just 2 days after Royals rally was really surprising, but it just makes you excited and excited about things to come.
Jackson, I want you to answer Carson's question real quick. Do you think it's safe to say, is it final? Can you pull the trigger on a Bobby Witt jersey?
Already did. Had one for opening day. I think either last year or the year. I had one his rookie year. Yeah. Look, I've pulled the trigger on a lot of Royals jerseys. Hosmer, Moustakas, Kane. Obviously, rest in peace to Ventura. Bought his jersey as well. Just a ton of Royals players that end up obviously not being able to stay here for long. So, just to get into kind of my thoughts about the Bobby extension, started off and related to the question. Yeah, finally a jersey that was a good investment. But no, in all seriousness, I was thrilled, man. I was absolutely thrilled with the deal. I didn't care. I tweeted the night before it happened because I think John Hyman, however you say his name, he tweeted out something saying that, like, there had been progress on a deal with Bobby. And I was just like, give him whatever he wants. Just give him the years, give him the money. There's really not a high enough. There's not a number I wouldn't pay Bobby Witt Jr. right now. Like, he's 23 years old. He's going to enter his prime. He's already a top 3 shortstop before he's entered his prime. Really, in the second half of last year, you saw him break out into that superstar status after having a little up and down first half of the season. So I was just thrilled with it. I didn't really care what the number was. I wanted this organization for once to invest in one of their own. I was tired of, you think about the talent this organization has brought up just since like the 21st century. You talk about Beltran, who they let go. Talk about Greinke. They turn him into probably the best pitcher in baseball. Then they have to deal with him. And obviously it works out in the grand scheme of things, get Escobar and Kane out of it. But still, it's like we needed to keep one of our own. I know we did with Gordon, but Alex Gordon was in his 30s by the time we did that. I know we have with Salvi, but this just feels different. This is the guy you drafted, you developed, you brought him up. He's been here, and hopefully he's going to get to go through the terrible years and then ascend into the championship window that Kansas City's trying to build. So I was thrilled with it. It really was good to see because so far in John Sherman's time in Kansas City, it had really just been, and I've been very vocal about this, we want a new stadium, we're trying to get that done. We're trying to relocate to get somewhere else, and we're going to field all these offers, blah, blah. And my entire time, I'm like, please just fix the product on the field, because if you did, the fan base would be on board with, whatever. Like, if the Chiefs wanted a new stadium, I guarantee you it's going to get passed way easier, much faster than this Kansas City Royals thing, because the Hunt family has actually invested and put a winning product on the field. So that's been my argument this entire time. I'm not anti-new stadium. I was just you can't throw a 56-win team on the field year in and year out and expect us to just, financially put in for a new stadium. And this offseason, of course, the Bobby extension caps it off. But like we mentioned, getting Lugo, Waka, Hunter Renfroe, other key pieces, it's really just been refreshing, and it feels like a positive and good step in the right direction for the Royals.
Yeah, I would say, this is the first time that you've seen a small market team invest this much into their own organization. Like, I know
Since the
that other,
Padres.
yeah,
Didn't work out too well for them, but
Padres is a weird situation to me though
yeah,
too, because
100%.
their ownership went crazy, and they're not. And the Padres aren't they're not known anymore as a small market team. They've developed away from that. Like, they no longer are a small market team. They're a big market team now, if you ask me. And something I wanted to talk to you guys about, and this is something I've been thinking about, is I wonder if this is John Sherman's way of saying we're no longer going to be a small market team. Like, I don't know how that works in the world of baseball, right? But at some point, there is a way that you can take a small market team and make it into one of the bigger market teams in the MLB. And it starts with ownership. And I think this is Sherman's way of saying, okay, I see what the Chiefs are doing. I see what the city's doing. And I want something. And I need to make sure that I make an investment to ensure that I have the backs of everyone in KC. And if that means I have to become a big market team or move away from that small market mentality, then let's do it. Because at the end of the day, Sherman wants that stadium no matter what. Like, you can tell that John wants it so bad. Like he has done almost everything just to make it happen. He's invested on players in free agency. And while he said in the press conference that he won't do it every year, at least he knows that this year is the year. Like, this is the year that he needs to invest and try to put out a winning team in Kansas City. And then they talk about, the other team across Truman, they're winning like crazy, and we need to like take advantage of that. You add that plus the stadium stuff, plus just fans getting tired of seeing the same thing over and over again. It's kind of like Groundhog Day at some point, where we go to a game and we either expect to lose or we just get really excited that we get to win a game against a team like the Dodgers or the team like a Yankees. So to me, this is Sherman's, I don't know what you guys think, but I think this is Sherman's way of saying, okay, we're going to, get rid of that narrative that small market teams can't compete or small market teams can't spend, because we were a top 5 spender this season. And on top of that, we just extended one of our young guys, or the young guy, to probably one of the biggest extensions pre-arbitration that we've seen in a very long time. I know Mike Trout has had his extension pre-arbitration, and I think Julio had his extension too, but Bobby Witt now has that contract.
If it goes,
I don't know what you guys.
If it goes the full 14, if he keeps opting in and the Royals exercise it after year 11, I saw it will be the third largest contract in the league's history behind Ohtani, who obviously no one's touching Ohtani's contract for some time now, and Trout. So, I mean, this is, if it goes all 14 years, which, who knows what's going to happen in 14 years. But if it does, I mean, it would be the third largest investment we've seen in league history to this point.
Yeah, and it's, you bring up just an interesting, point, Cristian, is, you talk about like, hey, Sherman's showing that we're not a small market team. There's plenty of examples of small market teams who spend money and are successful long-term winners. Cardinals, St. Louis is not much of a bigger market than Kansas City. Milwaukee, Cincinnati are smaller markets than Kansas City if you look at metro size. And yet those clubs, they know they spend money, and they try to do the best to keep their players. Now they have waves, like we've seen with the Brewers right now. The Brewers spend 1 year were spending money on Cristian Yelich, and now they're kind of trading Corbin Burns and kind of looking to trade Willy Adames. I think I'm really encouraged, because I think what we're seeing from Sherman is something that's closer to that model, than kind of what I thought he was going to have, like a Tampa Cleveland model, which is very like, it's like, hey, we're not going to really be extending players, or we're going to be kind of cheap with how we do things. That was kind of what I thought we were going to see. And we're kind of seeing right now is, Sherman's not like that. And it's really hard to kind of see what Sherman, I think this is really the first true test of Sherman's ownership, because you got to think he took over the club during the pandemic, obviously had a year where they're generating no revenue at a stadium. He was one of the few owners that did pay his players, minor league players, so I imagine, just probably like he wanted to do this in year 1 or 2, but the pandemic kind of limited, and he had to probably say, well, I got to kind of save some money before we do something like this. But, the thing is, it's like, you can be a small market team, spend, but you can also build a long-term winner. And that's what I'm hoping Sherman does. It's not just like we're going to spend for free agents and be like Steve Cohen or Hal Steinbrenner from the Mets and Yankees, but we're going to be like we're just going to keep our good players and also build a good farm system and build a consistent winner here in Kansas City for years to come.
And let's be honest, like, you look at it and you bring up like the Dodgers and Yankees and the Mets and all these teams that spend a crap ton in free agency. It doesn't guarantee championships. It doesn't guarantee anything. I mean, the Dodgers have been probably the best team in baseball the last 10 years, and they have one ring to show for it. And it was a COVID year ring. It was a 60-game season ring, which, like, look, I can't take it from you. Everybody had the same exact circumstances, but anybody that watches baseball understands the drastic difference between a 60 and 162-game season. And, it's consistently, though, the Dodgers are the best team in the league, and they get bounced. Atlanta, the last few years, they've been unbelievable. They keep getting bounced. They can only get one ring. So going out and spending a ton of money doesn't necessarily guarantee you're going to bring in all of these championships. I don't think anybody in Kansas City is asking them to go out and get guys like Ohtani, go get guys like Juan Soto. It's keep the guys that you do develop that are all-star level talent, and then go get some veteran pieces like Waka and Lugo. And look, I'm not going into this year expecting them to compete for a World Series in the slightest. Not at all. Their over-under win total is like 73.5. Anybody expecting a World Series is destined to get crushed. But is it unrealistic that come All-Star break, we're not out of the race in the Central? It's the worst division in baseball. Like, is it out of the question that we couldn't be in the race come July, August, hell, even September, maybe? I think it's perfectly reasonable this team could win, anywhere between 75 to 85 games now.
Yeah, and let's talk about that for a second. The state of the AL Central. If you're other AL Central teams and you're seeing the Royals keep a guy like Bobby Witt long term, sign all these veterans, are you scared? Are you kind of afraid of the potential of what the Royals may become? Even taking last season's.
I think so, right? Because if you look at the AL Central, who are the teams that spend in the AL Central historically? The Twins and the Tigers. And the Tigers because they have that Little Caesars money with their ownership. The White Sox have had notorious cheap ownership. Jerry Reinsdorf is known for being a cheap owner. Cleveland is known for having cheap ownership. And so now that if you're the Twins and the Tigers, you're kind of like, oh man, now the Royals are spending, because we're used to them being like the Guardians and the White Sox. Now they're going to be more up with us. So if I'm in the Central, I'm kind of worried. Maybe not this year, but if you're looking long term, you're saying like maybe we gotta up our money, because we can't just depend on the Royals being that another small market team that's just gonna spend under $80 million and move on.
That's right, Carson. That's right.
No, and I think like that's funny, but like I honestly do agree with the point. I wrote about this in my most recent article, and I wrote this article prior to Bobby signing this extension. I had no idea he was going to sign this, but when I was saying the Royals window is like a lot, it's right now, it's closer than people think to win, is because the AL Central has largely been incompetent as a division since really the Guardians had that year in 2016 where they blew the 3-1 World Series lead, where they were an unbelievable team. Since then, from like 2017 to today, the American League Central has not produced any World Series caliber team. The last team to win a World Series from the AL Central was the Kansas City Royals, which feels like a lifetime ago at this point, even though it was only 9 seasons ago at this point. But like the AL Central is incompetent. The White Sox, for no reason, just want to pick up all the Royals scraps, which, I mean, what an odd organization to go after. I mean, Chris Getz, the GM now there, I guess He just wants everything to do with the Royals. The Guardians, like you mentioned, outside of, keeping Jose Ramirez incredibly cheap, how much longer will Shane Bieber be there? Probably not too much. They're not going to invest a ton. Same with Tristan McKenzie in the next few years. They're probably not going to keep them because they're cheap. Detroit, while they do spend, they have a horrible contract right now with Javier Baez. Just got out of a horrible contract with Miguel Cabrera. They don't have the best track record of spending. And then you kind of left with the Twins. And the Twins are a solid organization. They're good. They never field an elite level team, but they field a competent team. But even the Twins just trading away Jorge Polanco, it blows my mind in a division this wide open when you're guaranteed a playoff spot and three home playoff games if you just win the division. In a division this wide open, teams are not more aggressive. Like, how do you let the Kansas City Royals outspend you? How? These other 4 GMs, and honestly, you've got to answer for this if you're any small market team at this point. If the Royals can go out there and spend $100+ million and then ink Bobby Witt Jr. to a 14-year contract, what's your excuse? Like, why aren't you spending the money? People, I get not everyone has Yankee money, but we're talking about billionaire owners at the end of the day. The Royals finally invested in their own team, and I really, really, really hope it pays off, not just for the Royals, but for other small market teams.
I think teams are still stuck in that mindset of the Athletics, Moneyball. Like, I don't know what it is about owners loving this idea of that you can win a championship team on the cheap. It's happened before, don't get me wrong, but it's time to move on, old man. Like,
and did people even watch Moneyball? Because the Athletics don't win the World Series in Moneyball. Like, did we even watch the damn movie? Like,
go Royals. No, yeah, and you make a good point, Jackson. And for me, it's just owners still have this mindset that they can win without spending money. Oh, there goes Kevin. Well, hopefully Kevin comes back here in a second.
He'll be back.
But he'll be back. But Jackson, you know, I'll pop him out too, so it's just you me. It's crazy to me that teams still think that they can win on the cheap, and it's not like that anymore. It's just not the way it is.
Again,
like look at teams. Look at these small market teams. They're still trying to do that. They still think that. Oh, there he is. There you go. Hi, Kev.
There we go.
Can you hear us, Kevin? Okay, cool.
Sorry about that.
No, you're good. You're good. I was saying, small market teams, they still have that mindset because they still think that with elite, with their farm systems being so high as they are, that they could win with young talent. Now, while that does work to an extent, it comes to a point where you need to spend money. Like, you can't just let these guys go, because small market teams start complaining that there needs to be a competitive balance and that there needs to be this and that. While it is true to an extent as well, it's also your fault for not spending on players who can stay with your team long term. Like, if the Royals would have not given, oh, there he goes again. If the Royals did not give Bobby Witt Jr. this extension, to me, it would be an issue, because then he goes to like the Rangers or he goes to the Dodgers. Then it's just the same old thing where great players go to teams that spend a lot. So,
I mean, just look at it in the sense that, like, this past year, right? The Rangers won the World Series, and the player that they invested the most in the past offseason, Jacob deGrom, did he even pitch 50, 60 innings the whole season?
No.
They took a huge swing on him and missed. Then they go at the trade deadline and take on a huge salary. I know they don't have to take on all of it, but they still have to take on some of Max Scherzer's salary, who's on a pretty big deal. Obviously, they signed in previous offseasons Simeon and Seager, and I get not every single team can do that. Like, there is something to be said about how the financial competitive balance in baseball is completely skewed. It needs fixed. There's definitely an argument for that to be had. But at the same time, there's a reason teams like Tampa Bay never break through and win it all. It's because when you're just strictly going off cheap deal, hoping for guys to produce off $2 million deals consistently, man, it's just hard to win that way. But I think we're seeing a turn. I really do think we're seeing a turn, and the Royals have just kind of added to that of inking your young stars early. You saw it with Julio Rodriguez in Seattle. Obviously, it's unfortunate the way it panned out, but Tampa did get a deal done with Wander Franco. At least they financially finally committed to somebody. Obviously, unforeseen circumstances happened there that nobody really could have seen coming, but at least they,
Right.
A historically cheap organization went for it with Franco. Now the Royals with Bobby Witt, and I assume you're going to see a team like the Orioles do that with Adley Rutschman and Gunnar Henderson. So I think you are seeing a difference. Of course, the Padres able to keep Tatis as well. These small market teams inking their young superstars early, not letting them get to their third arbitration before it's too late to sign them to a contract extension.
Yeah, and you talk about Padres, but also other small market teams. Let's try this again, Kev. There you go, Kev. Hopefully, things are going well on your side. But to me, the Royals, this is a good thing. Again, this contract, this extension, this gives me a lot more positivity and a lot more optimism about what the organization will look like in the future. But again, Sherman said this in the press conference too. He's already prepared to hear what other owners are going to have to say about him spending this much money in the offseason. Because someone asked him, is this your message to small market teams that they can spend too? And then he was like, oh, well, they're just going to give me stuff when I go to the owners meetings. And it's true. I mean, I can assure you that other owners around the MLB, they're probably going to be like, you do not represent the small market in the MLB. Like, you're a rarity. Like, you're
I
unique.
don't care. I'm thrilled with it. Good. Put pressure on those cheap asses. Like, I'm sorry, pardon my French, but put pressure on them. Like, these guys, every single owner that owns a baseball team is a billionaire. There's no reason a team like the Athletics that has a total payroll of $35 million should ever take the field for a full season. There's no reason Justin Verlander should make more than an entire baseball team in a season. Should never happen. What the Royals are doing right now is genuinely good for baseball.
Yeah, and again, you're right. And again, I hope that small market teams look at this and say, okay, maybe we need to start spending money. Because I get the argument of you're tired of big market teams being able to take advantage of getting these great players. But if you just sit there and let it happen, it's like someone beating you with a stick, and the most you do is get like a plastic tray to defend yourself. It's only going to do so much before you keep getting hit with the stick. Like, at some point, you need to buy a whole shield, or you need to, put yourself in a coop or something so you can be defended. So small market teams, they just need to start spending. And I think what the Royals did is monumental for that, not only for the franchise, but for Major League Baseball in general.
Yeah. And sorry I came in late, having some internet issues, but and to further your point, this expanded postseason is going to allow people to compete. We saw the Diamondbacks with 83 wins make it to the World Series. So, it gives incentive to small market teams to say, look, like, you don't have to be a 100-win team. You don't have to be a 95-win team, but just make the dance and you got a shot. And I think Sherman and the Royals saw that and said, you know what, if we just get in, if we win 82 games, which might be enough in the Central, maybe it's enough and we can go on a run like the Diamondbacks.
I love the point. And I also love the point because I think in the past there's the worry that, okay, we don't win the year that the Royals went to World Series in 2014. I remember the NL Central that year had the 100-win Cardinals, a 99-win Pirates, and 98-win Cubs, I think is how it went, or maybe it was another team. Anyways, though, like, when you go all in financially and you go all in and trade all your prospects, the difference back then is it was one game if you didn't win your division, one wild card game. Anything could happen. Nobody knows that better than Royals fans with the way the 2014 wild card game went. Anything could happen. And it is hard to put so much financial and, your prospects out and so much future stakes on one 9-inning baseball game versus now where you're guaranteed a series. You're guaranteed at least best out of 3, which, is that like crazy different? Not necessarily, but like you saw with the Diamondbacks, like it does things. Like you go win that series. Okay, now you get a best of 5 instead of, it's one and done. If your pitcher has a bad inning, your season's over. I do think that you made a really good point there, Kev, that I think the incentive for a small market to go compete, especially now, because if you're the division winner, you get all 3 games or the best of 3 at home.
Yeah.
And all 3, you don't have to go on the road once in that best of 3. If it goes all 3 games, you host all 3 games, which is huge. I really do think the MLB, the way they've changed the playoff formatting, does benefit small market teams like that.
And yeah, and I see all these things too. The only thing that I still get like that sucks is when leagues like the AL East, where you have, I think it's Yankees, you got there's such a competitive division that also kind of kills the mood for small market teams, because the AL East has some good spenders, and you see the playoffs, most of them were getting into the wild card. But you guys make good points again.
But like Cristian, who would you say is the worst team in the AL East right now? Probably Boston, right?
Yeah, Boston.
And that's historically a big spender. Like you've got Tampa and Baltimore up there, who are you'd probably put the Yankees as the favorite right now after acquiring Soto, but you wouldn't put Tampa and Baltimore too far behind them.
Yep.
So, you do bring up the point where, like, as a small market team in a really competitive division, it kind of kills your confidence. But I think, honestly, right now, I mean, look at the AL East, and I think also look at the NL West. Like, right, the Dodgers do win that division by a long shot, but like what Kev said, if you're the Diamondbacks, you don't have to win that division. You just have to get in. And the Diamondbacks took care of the Dodgers in the playoffs. Like, it's just, you catch lightning in a bottle. You've just got to get in the dance. It's so similar to March Madness in that sense, where it's like we see teams that looked pedestrian all season go on runs every year, and we see teams that looked invincible all year just crumble. And it's really the only sport you really see that happen. And in the NFL, you mostly see the 1, 2, and 3 seeds make it. The MLB, it is just
unpredictable. Let me ask you guys something. I know it's a little too early, but what would you say is like the X factor for the Royals to win the Central or make the wild card? Like, what has to happen?
I think one, they have to stay healthy, right? It's like we've seen what happened when Vinny Pasquantino went out. So being healthy, this roster is going to be key. I think the X factor is Reagan's. I mean, I think Waka and Lugo are going to give you consistency. I think Singer is going to bounce back a little bit, but I think he is what he is. He's kind of going to be a 2.5 WAR pitcher. Not a bad guy to have in the 3 or 4 spot. But you look at it like baseball perspectives. They had their PECOTA projections. They're having Reagan's kind of his WAR essentially, according to them, is about 2.2. And then you look at a guy like Tariq Skubal, who's got a 3.4. I don't know. I mean, I think, to be honest, like, I know both Skubal is a little bit more proven, but I think skill-wise, I don't think Skubal has anything that Reagan's doesn't have in terms of actual skills. I think obviously Skubal has a track record and that counts for something. But if Reagan's is going to be a 4 WAR pitcher, like that's an ace, right? And it's like, and if you got this guy who's an ace, that makes it a lot easier on everybody else. And that's going to that's going to kind of have a positive effect on the rotation, a positive effect on the lineup. If Reagan's kind of plateaus and doesn't kind of become what we think he can be, then then this team might be more a 3rd, 4th place team. But if he's an ace, I think we got a shot. And most importantly, we have a shot in the postseason because we have that guy who can take the ball in game 1 of any series or even game 7. And so I think that's also an important thing to factor.
I think I'll give you 2, because I think there's one that is just a tough break, and the other I'm just more curious in. The first one is the schedule. I don't know if you guys have really dove into it. I know baseball, schedule isn't like a football schedule where you're like, oh, look at like week 8, no. But from opening day until, June, basically the first 45 to 50 games, they have to play Minnesota, who's coming off winning the division, the Astros, who are coming off going to the ALCS again, and they also won their division, the Rangers, who coming off a World Series, Baltimore, Toronto, like they get hit hard to start the season with contenders from a year ago, and teams that look like they're going to contend this year as well, with really very few breaks. I think they might get the White Sox in there for a series, or maybe Detroit, but I mean, they get hit hard. So I think surviving, like if they can get 15-20 to start the season, that's a win, because this schedule, just the way it broke, is tough to start the season for Kansas City. The other thing I was going to say, though, is the outfield is really my X factor this year for Kansas City. because I think you just have so many unknowns in the outfield. I think bringing in Hunter Renfroe gives you more stability. You kind of know what you're getting out of Hunter Renfroe. Just kind of a power bat, not really a great defender, but a guy who you get what you get with him. And the rest of the outfield, man, it's kind of up in the air. Melendez, I mean, second half of last year, he was a lot better. First half was a really big struggle, and we've kind of seen that with him where it's like he's very streaky. Drew Waters, I like him. Is he anybody that is going to move the needle? Maybe he has that potential, but so far, nothing crazy. Isbell, he's all right. I just think the outfield, they definitely have to produce better than they did a year ago, and I'm interested to see how those guys do go about it this year. And I mean, you could even throw a guy in like Nick Lofton if they want to throw him in the outfield this year, how he performs. It'll be interesting to see. I think it's the one part of the Royals lineup that is kind of flawed. I think the infield is fantastic, especially after some of the moves they made this offseason to add depth with Garrett Hampson and Adam Frazier. It's really that outfield, those three guys out there. I'm interested to see how that goes because Isbell's more of a defensive guy. Renfro's more of an offensive guy. And then Melendez is just kind of a tweener. Really doesn't look right in left field. Hasn't been a great catcher. It'll be interesting to see how that goes.
Yeah, for me, I think it's going to come down to bullpen, how the bullpen looks, and how the outfield looks. To me, don't get me wrong. We've spent a lot on the bullpen, but we just don't know what it's going to look like because we don't know who's going to really close. I know that we got someone as a closer, Will Smith, who has shown that he can close, but the Royals are still interested in making a trade for a closer because we've been in contact with AJ Puck. We've been connected to AJ Puck for the Marlins or these younger pitchers who have more controllable years. We've been in connection with them. So I don't know if this is the last kind of changes that are going to be made to the bullpen, but I think bullpen's going to matter a lot because that's what wins you games in the postseason or in the long stretch. Yes, starting pitchers matter, but when you have a bullpen like we had last year, that was a big reason why we weren't great because we had a bullpen that could just implode in a matter of seconds. The only bright spot, there were some bright spots, and one of our bright spots we traded away for a potentially awesome pitcher, sending Chapman away to the Rangers in exchange for Reagans. That was a great move, but Chapman was one of our only guys who really consistently showed that he can be great as a bullpen guy. But now you bring in all these different players, all these different elements from different teams. I'm very interested to see what forms, if we'll get another three-headed monster or if we're going to get some more consistency. In terms of the outfield, I wouldn't be shocked if they called up Tyler Gentry, call him up, put him in the majors, bring in a young guy. It's worked so many times with other competitors in the AL. Look at the Rangers, Evan White, young guy. He was in the majors, a good outfield prospect, and they needed that. They needed it. They called him up, and he made a difference to an extent for a team like the Rangers. Now you look at the Royals, if the outfield doesn't start to shake out, I wouldn't be shocked to see if Gentry gets called up and one of our outfield guys gets traded. MJ is another interesting point because last year was his first year being in the outfield, right? First time. I wonder what he'll look like after a full offseason of practicing in that position, athletically getting prepared for that position, already having a year of experience. I'm very interested to see what he looks like after 1 year of this experiment that the Royals are doing. And one more thing, I do think catcher is going to be a big thing because catcher, I don't want to call it a big question, but I would say that it's going to be fascinating to see what they do with a guy like Salvi and Freddie. And you have other guys in the minors who are great catching prospects, and maybe they get called up this year. Maybe they don't. But I don't know what they're going to do with Perez. I don't know who's going to be our catcher long term. We don't know if Furman has it in him to be a starting catcher, with his defensive metrics and what he looks like at bat. But that's another one.
Yeah.
And
No, I totally agree with you. I mean, it's and yeah, the bullpen's going to be interesting because we saw guys like James MacArthur really have a strong September. We saw guys like John McMillan have some good stretches. And Carlos Hernandez. I'm not saying Carlos Hernandez is going to be the closer, but can he be like a good setup guy? He showed stretches of that. But it's. I think the bullpen is going to be key because I think that's been an Achilles heel of this group the last couple years. Is they just haven't been a good bullpen. Even when Scott Barlow was good, there just wasn't a lot of depth. And so I think we need to see not just an elite closer, but also like good depth from the 6th, 7th, and 8th inning, and as well as the 9th.
Yeah, and I think that you look at it, and I don't think it's talked about a lot, but bringing in Nick Anderson via trade, I think can do a lot. I mean, dude's consistently put up good numbers out of the pen, consistently had a pretty low ERA, and now you put him in a pitcher-friendly park. I mean, that seems like a nice pairing for him. Coming into this bullpen, he could easily be the 7th or 8th inning guy. Chris Stratton, a guy bringing from Texas, could be a 6th inning. You got bodies now, right? Like last year when they traded Scott Barlow and they traded Jose Quaz towards the deadline, it was like, we are just throwing guys out in the bullpen. Like, we don't have guys. We've traded everybody we had. That's when guys like MacArthur and McMillan came up. And Carlos Hernandez, who had a really strong June, just for some reason couldn't get it going again the rest of the season, really struggled in the bullpen after we thought he might be the closer going forward. So it will be interesting, but I do think just depth-wise and personnel-wise, it's one of their better bullpens they fielded in a while. It should be – and I think having a better starting rotation takes some stress off of the bullpen as well. You talk about last year and just years past. I mean, if a starter goes 3 innings or 2, can't get out of the second, doesn't get to the 4th inning, doesn't get to the 5th inning, that just taxes a bullpen. It just stresses out a bullpen. It really, throughout the course of the season, just drains a bullpen down to where you're throwing in guys eventually just because your main guy's arms are cooked. So I think, the new starting pitching will complement the bullpen quite well.
I want to move on to a different topic that is related to Bobby Witt's extension, and Jacob brought this up. If Reagan's works out and we get him long term, I might cry happy tears. Same here. But that does field a great question. Who else will get an extension like this? Not as crazy as Bobby's, but a long-term extension to stay with the team for a while to avoid arbitration. And I'm just going to – my go-to guys right now is Vinny and Cole. I think Cole, you wait longer. Like, you might wait another season to maybe extend him. I know that he has controllable years, but maybe get him on a cheaper deal, on a longer kind of deal. So maybe get him like 5 years, get him on a cheaper contract. But to me, number one priority next is extending a guy like Vinny Pasquantino, because if you can get him playing at an all-star level on a cheap long-term contract, that's a win for the Royals. Because then you don't have to worry about losing him to other big teams that are going to want to give him a lot of money to play at an all-star caliber level.
Yeah, I'm in that boat too. I would say Cole is more important to extend for just a couple of reasons. One, pitching is very expensive, and you don't want to get to the arb years and trying to negotiate with an ace pitcher, because that can be a process that can hurt a lot of feelings, to be honest. We saw that last year with Corbin Burns. We saw that with the Rays and Tyler Glasnow. It gets ugly, and when you don't have the extension in place, the process gets ugly. The player has less investment in the team, and whether that players admit it or not, the vibes do affect. And so I'd say Cole would be the guy. I'd say if there's a way that even if you're just buying out the arb years, to be honest, like, that's the way to go. So you just don't have to deal with that drama on a year-to-year basis, because just pitchers are just always going to be in demand. And I think Vinny too, just because Vinny he's the power potential is really there. He's has one of the best batting eyes, like best plate discipline that we've seen from a Royals hitter in quite some time. And he's also another great clubhouse guy. And so you want to make sure that, hey, we got guys who are not just good, but also guys who are going to we could see be leaders in the clubhouse for a long time. So I feel like those two guys, to me, nobody else has really proven it to where I feel like, hey, like I'm confident to say like we just can't wait another year.
And I don't think even Reagans or Pasquantino have proven it to the point at this point where I'd give them more than 5. 5 years probably where I'd cap it with them. Mm-hmm. Nobody that I would give an 11-year deal or anything close to like we did with Bobby. A guy that I think is interesting and obviously probably hasn't put in enough reps yet to earn it, but potentially we look at, come November and be like, it might be time, is Michael Garcia, who, I don't know if he's really a third baseman. I think he's more of a shortstop, but I mean, obviously shortstop's taken up. Thought he played decent at third last year, but the bat is really interesting with him. If he could just add a little bit of power. I mean, he's a great contact hitter. He's good at getting on base, decent eye at the plate. If he could just add even just a little bit of power, like if he could get to like prime Whit Merrifield power, like where you're just getting us like 12 home runs a year, I think he's a guy that they would be interested in bringing back as well. And then, of course, say Singer or Lynch has a good year, it's probably about time you'd have to start a negotiation with them, which I don't think would be anything crazy considering their track record so far in their career. Neither of them have put up big pitcher money or performances. You wouldn't sign either Singer or Lynch to anything crazy at this point. Nobody would. But that might be the best time to sign them, is when you don't have to sign them for anything crazy. And you don't have to go through, like you mentioned, the arbitration drama that ultimately led to Corbin Burns, leaving Milwaukee. It's just wild to me that you're willing to lose a guy that good over like $500,000, but when, it is what it is, I guess, but that's just wild to me how baseball works like that. But yeah, I don't think they're going to extend anybody, honestly, until the end of the season. I think this was it. And I don't blame them necessarily. There's really not a huge rush to do it. Even though we like what we've seen out of Reagans and Pasquantino, the sample size is still relatively small. Yeah. I mean, Bobby's sample size is pretty relatively small to give him what we gave him. We just, had to, because if you wait too long, you're screwed. Yeah. And they made the right decision because obviously this dude's a phenom. He's second pick overall in the draft, flies through the minors, gets up here and just rakes. But not everyone's like that, and you can't afford to make a Detroit Tigers mistake where you just give a guy money just for the heck of it. You're just like, oh, we project you'll be good. Here's a 7-year gigantic contract.
I also think Bobby is one of the rare exceptions because he's a 5-tool prospect who is an elite all around. Like, defense is amazing, is great. He has great contact. He has great power. He has great everything. Like, there's a reason why he was the number 2 overall pick in his draft class. Like, there's a reason why you give a guy like him that kind of money. But you guys have made good points. And I also, this is another one that, again, I know he has a small sample size. If Nelly can produce a like 30 home run season, that's a guy that I would say keep him with the Royals, because he's going to be, if he can do that season to season, like a Jorge Soler, like that 1 year Jorge Soler was like magically good for the Royals. And if we can get that kind of production to like where we have our own Kyle Schwarber, I think you take that, because then you have production from a guy like Nelly, who, yes, he might strike out a little bit more than other batters, but at least he can score more runs and he has a more powerful bat than other guys in the team. Michael is a really interesting one, because if you see him in Venezuela, like, he's played really well. Like, he's been playing like crazy, and he started a fight at one point. Like, at one point, the dude's energy was so crazy. Like, and even then, like, you work with a guy like Escobar. Like, I know Esky has to be training that dude. Or has to be talking to him all the time, telling him, giving him advice about the Royals organization, how to get that kind of contract, how to be a winner. And I think that's another huge thing. And Garcia, if he can continue to show that he can play third base, if he can add that power, as you were saying, Jackson, I think he's another guy who will be like a cornerstone franchise piece for years to come.
Could be 100%.
For sure.
Wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if he. And to your point about him kind of starting fights over there in the Venezuelan league, I'm not advocating for anyone getting hurt, But
no.
I do kind of hope the Royals kind of get some of that dog back in them that they had back in the past, where like Herrera would throw at Brett Laurie and they just didn't care. And if you tried to mess with the Royals, they were going to come back at you 2 times harder. And they just Moose didn't care. Like when they threw at Escobar's head, Syndergaard did. Like they need some of that dog back in them, man. This, there's, don't be over the top with it, but they do need some of that competitive fire back within the organization that Herrera and Ventura and Moustakas had, where they were just kind of like, we know we're underdogs. We know no one really respects us. And we're it's kind of what the Chiefs have right now, where it's like, we don't care if nobody likes us. We're going to come out there and we're going to fight tooth and nail to beat you. And you just really have not seen that in the Royals since the 2015 run.
Yeah, we saw a little bit of it at the end. I feel I feel like we saw Q get a little bit more juiced up, like with umpires. We saw them getting more fired up, like, those Houston series, especially the Houston series in Houston. You had MacArthur go out there in consecutive nights and you struck out Kyle Tucker to end the game and Yordan Alvarez to end the game. That fires you up, and I'm hoping they can kind of take that momentum. I know we say that a lot with the Royals. They have a good finish. We're like, can they just bring that to April of the following year? But we kind of saw some of that energy, and like you said, if Michael can kind of bring that over from the Winter League, I think that'll be really good, because I think that team definitely needs it.
Let's finish the show up by bringing it back to Bobby Witt. Carson asked this question: does Bobby Witt have the potential to surpass George Brett as the best Royal?
That's spicy.
I'll go first, and I'm going to hear your guys' thoughts on this. I think there's a lot to get to George Brett's level, because George Brett is iconic, even outside of Royals baseball. The Pine Tar incident, World Series, all these different things that he's done, and his production is crazy. And he's established a franchise here in Kansas City in his time. I think Bobby has the opportunity to do that. I think Bobby athletically is a lot better to an extent. And I also do think that he has better potential, but it's hard to get up to George Brett's status. It's just hard. For example, you look at it would be hard to replicate, Tom Brady's success if you're a Patriot, or in the future, it's going to be hard to replicate Patrick Mahomes' success if you're the Chiefs. It's going to be hard to kind of meet up to these expectations of a legend like Brett. But I think the big thing for Bobby is that he needs to set his own attitude, his own kind of just presence in the locker room. He needs to step up and become the Patrick Mahomes of that club. He needs to say, okay, we're winning and we will do whatever it takes to win. Even if it means I have to go 3 of 3 for one night, or I have to make this wild defensive play to save us a game. I think Bobby needs to put himself in that mindset. And I do think that he has that mindset. But again, we just don't know. It's going to be a while. He's only 24. The kid's young. But it could happen. It could happen. I'm not saying it's not, but it could. It could.
Yeah. It's tough because of how baseball is now. Players rarely stay with one team, right? It's George Brett was kind of right before that era. He joined the Royals at a time where the Royals were very competitive. They were, the Royals at that time, they were competing with the Yankees for pennants, and the Royals aren't there yet. So a lot depends on if the Royals can bounce back. If the Royals kind of bounce back and become a good organization, yeah, he could be with this team a long time, like George Brett. Obviously he has the base stealing is better than Brett. I think maybe hitting for average, it's maybe not as great as Brett. That was probably Brett's greatest quality. I think power can be around the same. Defensively, I think he has maybe some upside just because he's a shortstop. I think it's going to be tough, right? You never want to put that on a guy in his third year, but I think there's a possibility. I'm not going to call it just yet, but if he brings a World Series title, if he stays in Kansas City for his career, yeah, I think it's in the ballpark. And in terms of his leadership, the guy's had it even since last year. If you went to the Royals rally in 2023, I remember one time when I was with the infield panel and Vinny was joking with Jake Eisenberg, and he was like, "Hey, why aren't you asking questions of Bobby? This is the most important guy in the room right here." And so, I think we're starting to see Bobby kind of slowly embrace that role last year, and I think he's really embraced it. And I think the players love playing with him, and so I think that's a positive sign. It's just winning. That's going to be the key part of whether or not he lives up to Brett's legacy.
When he came up and he ended up making his debut, my entire take with him has always been he has a chance to be the second best Royal of all time. And it's kind of still where I'm at. Like, I don't think he will pass Brett because I think passing George Brett is damn near impossible. It's just when a guy does it first somewhere, he will always it's always going to be harder to pass him. It's like if a guy, in 10 years from now gets drafted to the Bulls and he wins 6 rings on the Bulls, Jordan's still going to be the one in every Bulls fan's eyes that they're like, well, he's the GOAT. He's our best player ever. It's just something about doing it first. It's something about being the pioneer. And George Brett is Mr. Royal. He really is. He's the only player to play his entire career with the Royals and make the Hall of Fame. No other player's ever done that in the history of the franchise. And right now, I mean, you want to talk about who's the second best Royal. It's, I'm a younger Royals fan. I'm 22. So I would probably, side with Salvy's probably, in my eyes, the second best Royal ever just because he's got the World Series MVP. He's been there forever. But you could definitely argue other guys, Brett Saberhagen, Dan Quisenberry, guys back then. It's hard for me because I didn't see them play, but they definitely obviously give the respect to them. They did some crazy things. I do like the point about winning. What people, especially I didn't get to see, but some, like my grandpa tells me about, like back in the 80s, the Royals and Yankees were like a rivalry. They went at it in the ALs. To get to the World Series, that was the rivalry, and George Brett was a huge part of that. And you'd really need Bobby to do, like, he needs to be a part of something like that. He needs to be a part of a good stretch of winning. He needs to be a part of at least one World Series win, has to at least win one. If he wins 2, then I think you start having the conversation, especially if he's like the guy when they win both, you can have a conversation. Things can happen. But again, you don't want to spring that on a kid that's 23 years old. He's turned 24 in June. He's still so young. Kansas City really hasn't done anything with him on the roster yet. So it's really impossible to predict that yet. But I don't think it's ridiculous to say he goes down as a top 5 Royal ever. I remember, I think it was the COVID year when they had a couple of those warm-up practice games at Kauffman before the season started.
Yeah.
And Danny Duffy said he's the best hitter I've ever seen. He's the best hitter I've ever pitched against. Guys admire this dude. Guys see the talent within Bobby. They know this isn't just a, Kansas City sees it. Guys, professionals who have been around the game see it with him. And, I think at the end of the day, it's not unrealistic now that he's re-signed to think that, number 7 will be retired. He'll be in the Royals Hall of Fame, and he'll go down as one of the 5, maybe top 3 best Royals ever.
Before we go now, what would you grade this offseason? After everything you've seen, after all the signings, the extension, what would you grade this offseason? For me, I'd give this, I think the extension takes it from a B+ to an A+. I think again, and it's a big jump, but when I saw the type of players Royals signed, I was like, okay, I'm a little more optimistic. I want to see them keep one of their players long term, and that would take me to an A+. But now seeing that Josh Sherman is going to spend this money on a player like Bobby Witt Jr., I think this is probably one of the best off seasons we had since maybe when the Royals were, 2014, when they were the supposed, they were going to be in the World Series. And then, yeah, in the comments, if you guys are still here, give us your grades. But Kev, I want to hear yours.
I go A too. It's everything JJ said he wanted to do, he did. And he did it in a way that made sense financially and also made the team better. Wanted to improve the bullpen. He brought in Will Smith, Chris Stratton, Nick Anderson to the bullpen. Said he wanted to improve the rotation, brought in Waka and Lugo. Said that he wanted to keep Bobby long-term, signs him to the massive deal. And then the thing is, they're not blocking anybody. I mean, Bobby's Witt's contract is obviously the longest, but Waka, even the new guys, Renfroe and Frazier, they're all on very flexible deals. So the Royals also gave them a lot of flexibility that maybe they're not in the playoffs, or maybe they're like, well, we're in it, but not really. You can trade a Hunter Renfroe for prospects. You can maybe, if Hunter Renfroe has a good year, you can maybe trade somebody like Adam Frazier for some kind of deal if he has a good year. So there's a lot of flexibility too, which I like. And so it's not like they sign these guys. It's one thing to sign like Hunter Renfroe for like a 3-year deal, and you're like, oh gosh, like we have him on the roster for 2 more years after this. They gave themselves flexibility. That's why I give it an A. It makes the team better, but it also gives them opportunities to get better down the road too, and also encourages their young guys that their young guys step up. They can easily part with some of those veterans too.
Yeah, I posted an article on Farms to Fountains. If anybody's listening and wants to go check it out about this exact topic, I graded the offseason. This was prior to the Bobby extension and also prior to Adam Frazier signing with the Royals. So obviously it's not the same. At the time, I gave it a B+. I was overall pleased with it. I'm probably going to go A-. I'm not going to go, I guess we got A+, A, A-. We got to have all 3 of them. But I say one of the few things that I'm a little concerned with the Lugo deal. Not that I don't think he's decent, but he's only had that 1 year as a starter. And I think, it's a lot of money for a guy who's been a starter 1 year and otherwise been a bullpen guy. There's some concerns there. I'm hoping the best. And I think, look, I even wrote in this article, when you're a team coming off an 106 loss season, you have to spend, you have to pay more for guys that other teams wouldn't have paid as much for. That's just the reality of it. No one's taking a discount to come play for you when you're an 106 loss team. So I'm a little concerned there. Also, just like the Garrett Hampson, Adam Frazier situation with Massey and Lofton all clammed in there. To me, I'm going to be interested to see how they kind of go about that. I don't want to stunt Nick Lofton or Michael Massey from getting at bats, but I mean, we'll see their plan and how they decide to go about that. But overall, I mean, yeah, really good offseason. Getting Bobby extended was just the icing on the cake. And, it might not translate into a 90-win, AL Central Division champ season this year, but it should translate into progress moving forward. And if we're not contending the way we want to, you could easily flip Waka, Lugo, Renfroe, maybe Hampson or Adam Frazier at the deadline if they work out, because they're on cheap and affordable, for the most part, cheap, affordable contracts that aren't very long. I mean, the longest is Lugo, who has an opt-out after year 2.
Well, that does it for today's live stream of the KCCP Independent. Jackson, thank you so much for stopping by. It's always awesome to talk Royals baseball with you. Kev, as always, thank you for being a part of the show. We will see you guys next time, and hopefully by the time spring training is coming up real soon, Kev, you and I will have a lot of spring training stuff to talk about, a lot of things to see, position battles and whatnot. So thank you guys for stopping by. Take care, and
go
Chiefs
next
time. Oh yeah, go Chiefs.